Well, today we're going to look at some design. No, not graphic design, but landform design. Design plays an important part in composition, in contrast, in the elements and the way they rhythm and flow into each other. And that's what we're going to study today. And it's easy. You can do a few of these in one sitting. I'll show you how I did it. Oh, come on. You don't need a darker spot for a nap. Okay, fine. I'll put a bag over your head. Well, hello, minders. Welcome back to the Mind of Watercolor. Glad you could join me today. I am excited about what I'm doing today. I actually had the idea to paint some long sort of horizontal vistas. Fairly spontaneous. I wanted to put in some very high contrasting landforms. Open land, not heavily forested land. I've been thinking about and practicing connections and the way landforms flow into each other a lot lately. We've been doing some exercises over on my Patreon, and I just had this idea for doing some spontaneous paintings that are a little bit different. And today I'm going to do 3 of them for you. I'm going to paint them simultaneously, sort of. In other words, one and then the next while that one dries, and go back and forth like that with layers. And you will see a process of layering that's great to use for open scenes like farmland, prairie, fields, a variety of things. But you'll also, I hope, see how great a practice and exercise it is to get these rhythms of these landforms interlocking and flowing into each other while managing that high contrast. It's a little hard to explain. You just have to see it. Something that's been in my mind for a little while that I wanted to do. Now, a lot of times I use books for inspiration. I think in this case, it was sort of a reverse. As I thought of this idea, I thought, oh, I have a book where the guy kind of does what I'm thinking. And I honestly don't pull this book out very often. It's an old book. This goes back to like 1982. It's an artist by the name of Roland Hilder. I thought, yeah, that book is probably got some ideas. Now, I'm not following this book, but I did thumb through it to get some inspiration. He's got these wintry trees, which I wanted to throw a few of those in there. But he has this way of doing these stripy sort of landforms that fold into each other. But you see these striations, these bands of color and contrast. That's exactly what I had in my mind. And it was great to remind myself of his work and how it dovetailed with the idea that was forming in my head. I think this book is still available on the used market. Thought I saw some on Amazon. I'll put a link to that. I don't think it's in print anymore. If you can find it, great. Another thing I like about his ground and landforms are sometimes these linear elements. Here he gets these almost calligraphic, like little lines. Here's a good example, though, of the high contrast that he has. His trees are just dynamic. They're really nice. He's got some great use of ground shadows. And that's something that I wanted to practice. So that's what we're going to do today. I will be using my Mary Blue 6-color set. If you're not familiar, I have a video out where I go through and review each color and talk about the set. I'll link to that below. But I hope to also do some more videos just kind of zeroing in on specific colors or color approaches that really work well. One of the things as sort of a side theme in this is neutrals. I love this palette. Well, it was designed for landscape to begin with, but I love this palette for neutrals. It just creates some really great neutrals. And we'll do a lot for 6 colors. I mean, it really will. And I love using neutrals in a landscape. So I won't be talking about that a lot, but I did want to include that in my intro so you can be watching for that. All right, let's get busy and do some painting. All right, as I get started on this is a 9x12 arch block. I'll have all the details of supplies down in the description as usual. I've divided this into 3 sections, 3 studies basically, and I'm going to kind of paint them, concurrently. Each section as it dries, I'll go to the next. Now this is on dry paper. I am not pre-wetting this paper at all. And the reason for that is I want these shapes that I'm composing and folding into each other to be crisp, to be able to have some nice edges. It's just going to be a different look, basically, because I want to focus on that contrast and those edges. I can still soften edges where I want to or need to. These are skies, and I'm using a couple of colors. This middle one is the quinacridone lake mixed with some indigo. The top one was some phthalo turquoise along with the dragon's blood. And maybe I think a little bit of yellow ochre. Bottom one is yellow ochre and some indigo. You can see how I'm, without pre-wetting the paper, I'm just sort of dry brushing out some of the edges to soften them. And sometimes I've been going in with a wet brush and softening the edges. But this is on dry paper. And now I'm going back and doing sort of a landform or a light pass on the landforms. And this is going to establish the base. Everything at this point is light, but I wanted to leave enough white or really bright areas so I can create these bands of contrast. I'm waiting on those to dry. And I'm taking my cues from the edges and shapes now that have been created by the white space that's been left, by the shapes that have been created by an overlap. So you see those overlaps from one wash to another will create their own shape. And that is actually kind of delightful. So I try to work those in and then create some sort of dark tree line shapes. Maybe they're shadow shapes, I don't know. Color is not particularly important. I hope you'll watch this episode and focus mainly on contrast and value, not think about color so much. I'm just varying the color just for interest. But what's most important to me right now is shape, the rhythms of the landforms and how they fold together, creating these neat sort of contrast ribbons, if you will. It really is a design and composition exercise. In addition, of course, to being a value contrast exercise. And as you probably are noticing, each layer is getting darker. I'm also trying to add a little more linear detail as I go, just kind of stretching out those edges. This is if you're looking at farmland or fields. That bottom one, what I had intended to be a sky, kind of ended up looking more like just distant hills. And that's fine, that's kind of the fun sometimes of spontaneous work. And once I've gotten those shapes, those landform rhythms the way I want them, it's just a matter of, let's add some trees, let's add some detail, let's turn it into a scene. And these all really went quick. These compositions are really fun, and it's easy to do several, in a sitting. As you start to fold those shapes, those landform rolling hills back and forth into each other, a lot of the scene just ends up sort of painting itself or designing itself. There's a lot to it, this reaction. You put in a shape and you say, if I did that, then what would look good would be this. It's easy to be a little bit timid with contrast sometimes. Well, here's sort of the first finish before I took the tape off, but I did want to go back in and add some of these little linear details just to give a little bit of spice to those ground areas. The important part about that is you just don't want to obliterate those light values. I love this one at the top, especially for those distant, bright shards of land. I just thought that really worked well as a design. It looked like mist settled in the field or something. I don't know, but I loved it. Anyway, I hope you loved it. Thank you for watching. Thank you, patrons, for supporting this channel. We'll see everybody in the next video. Bye-bye.